Hello, and thank you for joining us for what I'm sure is going to be a very insightful discussion. For the next 40 minutes or so, we'll be talking about money worries and mental health at work, giving you some really practical advice and guidance and tips to take away back to your organisation to support the people that you are responsible for. I'm joined by two fantastic guests, experts in their field. First of all, my wonderful colleague at Raiys, our Wellness Director, Craig Lewis.
Good morning, everyone.
Welcome, Craig. Thanks for joining us. And Antony Price, who's the PayPlan Partnership Manager. PayPlan offer free debt advice, and I'm delighted to say they partner with us to help us deliver financial wellbeing support to the clients that we work with. We'd love you, of course, to be part of the conversation today, so do please share any thoughts, any questions that you have in the comments. Anyway, without further ado, let's find out more about our guests today. Craig, perhaps you'd like to start by telling us a little bit about your background, your expertise in wellness and well-being, and your work with Raiys.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, thanks so much, James. So I'm the Wellness Director here at Raiys. So my remit covers particularly operational and clinical delivery and scoping out our services, particularly for our sort of workplace wellbeing programs. My background's in health. I've been in healthcare for 25 years, so I've seen quite a few things over that time period, both within private sector healthcare and also within occupational health. And my expertise now is sort of stretching into the digital wellbeing, which is great in terms of being able to extend the scope to whole of workplace solutions. And obviously today's session's really important for us because financial well-being is going from strength to strength in terms of obviously interest from employees and also from organizations as well. So really interested in that link between health behaviors and financial behaviors and obviously well-being of individuals. So yeah, that's me.
Great. Thanks very much, Craig. And Antony, perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about the work that PayPlan does and your role within the organization as well.
Delighted to. So I'm one of the partnership managers at PayPlan. So my role is to connect with external organisations that really can make a difference to impact people's lives who need debt advice. I've worked for the organisation for the last 20 years. So for a lot of that time, actually doing debt advice myself day to day and working with those that need help. And as a service, we've been around for 32 years. We're a free UK-wide debt advice service, providing not just only debt advice, but a full range of debt solutions as well. So a really holistic approach to supporting people who need that financial support when it matters the most.
So you definitely know what's going on the ground, basically, Antony.
Absolutely.
We'll be picking your brains about that a little bit later on. So I guess the best place to start really is the title, money worries and mental health. What is the link between the two? Craig, your mental health background here sort of comes into play, doesn't it? And you've already alluded to the fact that there is a bit of a vicious circle going on with both financial money worries and somebody's mental health in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's obviously more and more statistics coming out as research is being conducted. But the one that really grabbed my attention was the fact that individuals that have sort of long-standing mental health issues, they're nearly 10 times more likely to have experiencing financial difficulties than an individual without that long-standing history. And then if you flip it over, people that are experiencing financial difficulties which are persistent, they're probably nearly between 5 to 6 times more likely to then experience a mental health issue, again, compared to people where their financial situation is much more stable. So whichever way you look at it, the chicken and the egg, finance versus mental health versus finance, there's a significant impact where somebody is experiencing difficulties in both areas.
And Antony, you see that day to day in the calls that PayPlan takes, presumably.
We do, yeah, every single day. Debt, mental health, so intrinsically linked. It's just that vicious merry-go-round, as we've just explained there. And I think one of the key reasons for that is because it's an everyday part of life. Money is. It's just there. It's a constant. And so if that's not where it needs to be, it remains that constant, but in a very negative way. And just to give a bit of context to that, when we speak to clients to understand how debt's impacting them, 85% of people say that debt has impacted their mental health and well-being. So it's absolutely there for most people, and at different levels. And the impact, we'll talk about that, I'm sure, today. But absolutely, it's so intrinsically linked.
And so then, Antony, why is it so important for managers, employers, people on this call to kind of understand this a lot better than perhaps we have done in the past?
I guess my first response to that would always be it's a matter of concern for everybody, regardless who you are, because the reality is it can happen to anybody at any time. And that means that for people who have just come to you, or people that have been with you for a long time as an employee, that could happen during their lifetime and life cycle within that service. And the impact of that is really wide and stretching. It can impact in many ways within the home, relationships, but ultimately absolutely within the workplace. And whether an employer knows that they have people within the workplace that are struggling or not, they have. That is happening right now. And the biggest message I would put across is that by having an awareness of this allows someone to unlock the potential to support staff. And don't underestimate the difference you could make in someone's life by having those open conversations and awareness and just providing that support. And there's lots of ways that organizations can do that.
And Craig, you alluded to the fact that maybe this has become more of a focus for managers in the workplace in recent years, and perhaps was something that maybe people neglected in the past, didn't really think that it was an issue that they could help with?
I think, managers and senior leaders, that the remit of what their responsibility is towards their teams and their employees is broadening over time. And I think a lot of managers and senior leaders want to embrace that. But then there is that apprehension about lack of knowledge, crossing over boundaries, stepping over the lines. And also it's sort of, worried about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. And I suppose that's a similar conversation that's probably happened earlier in the mental health scope. So again, people have gone through that cycle, and although maybe there's a lot of experience that's gained by senior leaders and managers in the mental health space, they're now presented with a new situation, a new conundrum, and financial situations are getting more and more complex. And, the world around us is getting more and more complex. Access to information is increasing, but knowledge can sometimes be overpowering. So where to go, what to say, when to say it. And I think one of the questions we might talk through during the session is, who is best to communicate the responsibility to the employees? Does it come from a manager? Does it come from a senior leader? Or maybe is it something that starts at a ground level, that, the employees who are experiencing the issue can actually communicate directly with peers? So I think that the messenger who's sending that message out to the workforce is really crucial.
Yeah, and we're going to come to that in a while. I guess one of the things that I wanted to sort of maybe start off with really is looking at what you see, particularly from the calls that you get, Antony, into PayPlan. I know when we were chatting ahead of doing this webinar, that I was really surprised to hear who's actually calling in now, and it's not necessarily who you would think it would be. So could you sort of talk us through some of the statistics and some of the calls that you get from people?
Yeah, absolutely. To your point, it's often quite eye-opening when people understand the nature of calls, who's actually presenting and needing information and support from us. And the reality is, it's everyone. There's not just one particular cohort or sector or part of society that needs our support. As I said earlier, debt problems can happen to anyone at any time. It just needs a snap and change of conversation. Change in a situation, and we're in a different place. So I guess to give some idea around how many people we're supporting and then who we're supporting, at the moment we've seen a real demand in increase for service and support. So every week last year we were supporting around 3,500 new clients coming to us for support. 18 months prior, that figure was 2,400. So you can see what has happened, that demand, because of, for example, the cost of living crisis. But this year we have peaked at 4,500 clients per week coming to us. that really gives you some idea of the scale of what's happening and the impact with people. And then interestingly, we see lots of different people coming to us for help, but we have seen some pockets of increase, some different shifts in demographics. One in particular, we've seen more homeowners coming to us, and that might be less surprising because of the rising interest rates. But coupled with that, we've seen a higher demand for services from people who have fluctuating incomes. That could be someone who's self-employed and maybe impacted by seasonality, right through to people who perhaps earn different incomes from employment as well, but maybe that's due to imbalance of shift patterns and demand on on services and how much they're getting in terms of hourly work. And then the one that I think we're probably referring to there that we had a conversation about is, for the first time in 13 years, we've seen a spike in higher end earners. Those individuals that perhaps earn more than £60,000 of income plus, we've seen a dramatic increase from that area. And I think that speaks volumes. It really just showed this can happen to anyone. And really, the reality is the more you earn, the more you may spend, the more access to credit you'll have, the more attractive offers from mortgages and credit cards and loans. It goes hand in hand.
Well, let's take that and then sort of translate it into that kind of career journey, life journey that somebody might go through, because I think that we can look at some of the pinch points maybe that somebody might face. I mean, I was just trying to make a note of some of the things that in terms of your career at work, the stages that you might go through, starting your first job, then maybe getting a salary increase depending on the job you do. You might be under pressure to actually deliver financial rewards for your company as well. And then, like you say, might suffer an injury or an illness, something changes in your life. And then obviously that piece towards retirement. So there are so many pressures through your working life, aren't there, Antony?
There are, absolutely. And those different milestones that some you're heading towards and trying to achieve, and others that will come out the blue and are unexpected, but can happen to any of us as well. And of course, people's focuses will shift depending on what's important to them during that period of their life, and whether that's perhaps getting onto, like I say, that career path. And maybe we're starting off at a lower wage, and we may perhaps have access to poorer forms of credit, higher interest, and there may be demands in that way because we perhaps don't have the income to allow us to have access to better forms of borrowing. And then right through to, as you said earlier, getting up that career path and that ladder, and how that may unlock other opportunities. But then focuses will shift and change within that. We may have a shift where we focus on buying our first property, getting on the ladder, or moving out of our home if we're still living with family, just thinking of that, and what's needed to be able to do that. And that goes hand in hand with saving as well. And again, really thinking of that balance of what they need now, but into the future. It's interesting when we look at people that come to us for debt advice, because a lot of people will associate debt problems and money worries to perhaps people who perhaps go out and run up debt, not intending to pay it back. People who get into a pickle, as I hear people say it. People can be quite flippant about that. And the reality is it's not like that for most people at all. It's life that gets in the way. It's changes of circumstance. It's different things that take us on different journeys, like retirement, like, buying a first home, children and starting a family. Let's have a talk about that, for example. That's such an expensive thing to have to do, but inevitably will happen to a lot of us. And we will have to make decisions and choices. And that could go hand in hand with decisions about money, borrowing, credit, and debt help.
And I guess at the start of a career journey, Craig, if somebody, say, for instance, they've been to university and are joining, a big professional organization or something, they might well come with debt to start off with. They might have run up some debts even before they've got into the workplace. So there's managing that as well, isn't there? As they come into the workplace, then they might want to, they'll need to rent somewhere potentially if they're not able to stay at home. They might want to buy their first car, that exciting moment when you've got your first salary and you're like, oh, what can I spend it on? it's advice at that stage that can be quite critical about helping somebody to then manage going forwards and think about that budgeting piece, which isn't something that, you know, a young person going into the workplace necessarily actually wants to hear. So it's a difficult one, isn't it, to start off with?
I think so. I mean, for, you know, when it comes to mental health or health, you know, education and literacy is crucial, and I think financial literacy is probably one. Antony, you hopefully will agree that, you know, the more people can understand and appreciate, then that gives options. It gives forward planning. It gives them the ability to balance, weigh up the pros and cons of a decision. And I think our exposure to debt is happening at a younger and younger age. You mentioned, obviously, you know, if we look at university and graduates, you know, they're exposed to significant debt, you know, early in their career, whereas, you know, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, debt was something that, you know, didn't maybe come onto our radar until, you know, later in our mid-20s or early 30s, as we took out a significant mortgage. So I think debt exposure, it's normalized that in some ways. And I would probably say that we want to normalize conversations around financial well-being. But yeah, normalization can happen in both a positive and a negative scenario. I just think, yeah, financial literacy, and that's why employers, you know, looking at educating their workforce, talking more openly, can only be a good thing. It's a very delicate topic. You know, we're all taught to not talk about it, or, you know, not mention where, you know, salaries, etc. But I think, as we've done with mental health, you know, normalizing the conversation is probably the first step, and then providing information tailored to the individual. You know, you don't want to be scaring people with maybe retirement plans in their early 20s. You know, nothing worse than you're starting your job and suddenly, you know, people are saying, you know, save. But at the same time, I think what we're finding when I'm talking to a lot of employees and managers, that people wish, oh, if I knew this 10 years earlier, I would have made different decisions. Yeah. So I think, you know, that's something that will come out of the education piece and will come out of the normalizing conversations, and getting internal colleagues to speak, you know, people that are more of a senior level, not just talk about what do I need to get to your level in terms of performance or, you know, business development, but also, you know, what does that mean for you in terms of your life stages and decisions you've made. So yeah, education. I'm sure that's been said before.
So let's talk about opening up that conversation then. Antony, you know, how do you go about that? And as Craig said, you know, how do you share a responsibility around that? Because I was thinking, well, is that something that the HR department should be doing? Should it come from the finance department? Should it come from your individual manager? You know, where on earth do you start?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's something that often we're asked when we're approached by HR, by, you know, organizations that really want to get a grip of what's happening and how they can support. I think the first thing is absolutely, you know, what's been mentioned already about normalizing the conversation. And it's a really interesting thing, isn't it, that we have absolutely normalized the conversation about borrowing, but not about how to get help if you're in difficulty at all. And just to, I guess, to give some context to that, there is often a big delay in people accessing support. So if you look at all of the clients that come to us every single week, majority of those clients will have delayed getting support for at least a year, 21%, 4 years or more. And that's for a number of reasons: fear, shame, stigma, shouldn't be, but often is. Not knowing where to go is a really key one. Or some people just hoping for the best, of course, thinking that things will uptick and things will get better. So the first thing I'd say is absolutely normalizing the conversation, because the quicker we do that, the more we'll have really healthy conversations about this, and people feel safe to ask questions. Because often people are terrified that, especially in the work context, if I get help, if I go to my team, if I go to HR, first of all, how will that hinder my career? Will that have an impact on my progression? Will that cease my employment? You know, that's a key one. And also, if I access that help, is it confidential? That's another key concern from people. So I think some context to that is really useful, because if someone's going out there as an employee to say, let's have conversations about this, let's have a normal conversation, that sends a really positive message back to staff that says, we want to help. It's okay when things get difficult. I'd also suggest looking at different ways of introducing that conversation at all levels. You know, if a leader is having those conversations, wonderful, but then also making sure that every area is having that same healthy conversation. Yes,
And when you
HR.
say about a conversation, sorry, Antony, to step in,
Yes.
that normalizing the conversation, what is that conversation?
Be?
You know, how do you, you know, is that getting everybody together for regular sessions about financial well-being, or what's the sort of nuts and bolts of that?
I would recommend doing a variety of things. So if you've got an intranet, great. You know, maybe having information and resources in there about financial well-being, debt support services, blog content. I think you've got to think about different things for different audiences, those different journeys and life event stages that we've talked about. Also, though, then how we can build it into perhaps best practice when it comes to, maybe we have wellbeing champions. You know, I know we do in our workplace, and we have different pockets of structured conversation. So we have one for menopause groups. Why don't we have one for financial well-being, debt support, that kind of topic? One thing I'd always suggest is also thinking of what I call the push and pull movement. Some people will be very happy to come and ask for information, to go and research that and be confident to come and ask, but some people will not. What can you do to push that information out? Can you put leaflets in certain workplace environments, posters? I always promote posters within private spaces like restrooms, little tear off strip posters where they can take some information away, put it in the pocket. It's private. It's saying we support you, but it's also saying you can do this without anybody knowing if you don't want them to know. Yeah. So that push pull effect, really key. And then webinars as well, you know, whether that's financial webinars, but making sure that we make information available not only to staff, but upskilling your team managers, team leaders as well, because ultimately they will have very private conversations with their staff. There's often a big trust element here, and getting that conversation right and how to respond in a non-judgmental way, absolutely critical.
And this is something we deliver for our clients, isn't it, Craig? And that anonymity, I think, is really, really important. And so, you know, if somebody goes onto our digital platform, for instance, you won't know who that is, but they know that they can go there, they can get help, they can be signposted to PayPlan or whichever organisation is going to help them. But having that trust is therefore the sort of first step into that conversation, isn't it, Craig?
Yeah, I'm thinking three things that sprung to mind when we've worked with organisations around financial well-being is the security element. So two elements to that, I suppose. One is providing people with access to what if things do happen, you know, in terms of, you know, debt or financial crisis, where can you go? And to know that that support is available for someone who's immediately in that situation, or could see over the next few years what would happen. Once you know that there is support available, that sort of potential safety blanket is good for us. Then I think there's the element of autonomy and control. We know from sort of mental health that when you feel out of control, that uncertainty causes additional stress. So sometimes the decision you're taking is going to be difficult, it's going to be challenging, and it may take quite a while for you to arrest a situation, but actually doing something, and the number of times, Antony, I'm sure, where people have called and that sense of relief when they're speaking to the financial counsellor to come away. So, you know, problem shared is a problem halved. And then I think it's a case of thinking about what simple behaviors that we can make. Sometimes people think that this is going to take a lot of effort, and actually doing something simple. So, you know, in terms of your motivation and putting it into practice, trying a few things, and then working towards a goal. I mean, again, I think that's a key area when we talk about mental health, or we talk about physical fitness or nutrition. You know, if you've got a goal to aim for, it's going to then take small chunks and habits to get towards there. So yeah, I think security and autonomy and control are the two key areas, really.
And also, I guess, Craig, understanding as a manager that somebody might be presenting with, you know, anxiety or stress, but behind that, there's a cause, and that cause could be financial problems, budgeting problems, debt management. And so how do you go about kind of spotting what that cause is? Is there a sort of decent way to open up that conversation if somebody's come to you with what is it looks like an entirely different problem?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it can be, if somebody is coming into a work wellbeing event, or whether it's, a one-to-one conversation, sometimes saying, these are some of the things that we could talk about today, whether it is, a mental wellbeing, whether it's around fitness, whether it's around career development, whether it's around financial. And often as the conversation develops, what starts off as, I find it difficult, I'd love to lose weight, or I'd love to get fitter, but gyms are so expensive, or healthy food, I always used to buy it, but now I'm finding it difficult. So naturally through those conversations, you can see that probably the underlying issue is that the financial side. And again, in terms of the mental health, if the anxiety is creeping up, what's causing it, if you could put your finger on one area. And again, I think the more we discuss, the more we chat, generally these things come, or probably what happens often, isn't it? You're in a conversation or a team meeting, then right at the very end, the last question is, well, actually, could I ask you about this? And I suppose that's where you've created a safe environment to talk around it. And this is the ideal time, if it's, we've got to finish the session today. It's, here is where you can go. So you've created that environment. You've then given people the chance to bring the subject up. And then you have got the next steps in place, whether it's, Antony and his services, whether it's, government websites like Money Helper, or whether it's an employee assistance program, which will often have a legal and a debt element as well. So, yeah, I think it's all about creating that environment, and there's never a bad time to talk about financial well-being.
Yeah. And Antony, when somebody does come to you for help, if they are passed over to PayPlan, what sort of help is available? Because I think, as you've already said, and we've already said in this discussion, there is a solution. There is usually a solution, and it might not be a really difficult solution to get on top of what seems like an enormous problem at the time.
Absolutely, yeah. The great thing for people to be aware of is that there are multiple solutions and options available that will be tailored around your circumstance. So the first thing I always talk about is how is so important for us to look at what somebody's circumstances are now, but also the background nature of what they've experienced, but also their future aspirations and wants and needs as well, so that we can come up with something that's going to be very holistic in its approach, but meet the needs now and into the future. Now, when we look at supporting somebody who comes to us, often a big part of that is budgeting, a budgeting exercise to go through and understand what somebody needs within their incomings and outgoings to run their household in a very sustainable way. So that's a big part of what we do. And that could include things like income maximization, looking at things like unclaimed benefits. It could be looking at ways to get people onto the right and more affordable tariffs. Just unlocking all of that opportunity is just part of debt advice. And then also looking at options such as debt solutions that could deal with somebody's struggles right now. And that can include us looking at ways to help reduce those payments down to a more affordable level, and maybe looking at something like a free debt management plan that helps somebody to pay an affordable amount, but to their debts through us, and we do all of the negotiation for them. It could include things like insolvency, some more formal but still supported solutions that could help even write off all of the debt that you have. But it could equally be things like empowerment. So us being able to help somebody to deal with the debts themselves, but maybe they just need to know the tools and the ways to tackle that head on, and to be us to help them support with that. Or even something like settlements, if somebody has a lump sum and they want to be able to deal with the debts through a one-off lump sum payment. There are a variety of options. Often people, when we speak to them, they think they will be forced to do something they don't want to do. So let me first reassure people that that's not the case. We're here to give guidance and support and outline the options available. And also most individuals that come to us for help, they will have certainly more than one option available. They'll have choice. And that's really important for people to know. Most people will have a lot of different options to weigh up and get a good idea of how that's going to impact them.
And the words that I picked out from all of that was free. It's free advice, isn't it? You shouldn't be going to get advice from somebody who's going to charge you a lot of money to provide that advice.
Absolutely. Yeah. And unfortunately, there are organizations that do what we do, but charge for it. So this is why we have partnerships in place, like with Your Good Selves, to make sure that's promoted and that people know that they can get that free. Because the last thing that somebody wants to be doing who's struggling is paying for a service they just can't afford. That's just going to get them further into debt difficulty. So free, confidential. The other thing just to mention is that people can access that support in a variety of ways. And that's so important because not everybody wants to talk about things out loud. You know, some people really struggle with vocalizing problems around finances. And some of that comes back to us as a nation not talking openly about money. So that's something that we need to do more of. But it's really important for people to know they can come to us and get help over the phone, yes, but in a variety of online options as well. You know, gone are the days where somebody wants to communicate with us in just one particular way. So we now offer live chat, email, WhatsApp, sign video for British Sign Language, but also language line for 240 different language interpretations. And that's important when we're thinking about the workplace and who your core demographic are, you know, within that workplace. Do we need to flex around approach, times of the day, shift patterns, you know, make sure that the services that can really adapt around that?
Yeah, actually, demographics was something I wanted to ask you both about, because I guess, you know, you've got 5 different generations working, you know, together nowadays. You've got possibly a cultural aspect. You might have people in the workplace who have a family that's dependent on them for their salary. From a cultural point of view, you know, are there differences in the way that you approach this, and also between maybe the way that men talk about money and women talk about money? How do you kind of get over all those different demographics that you might find in your workplace?
It's a really interesting one, actually. And you're right. So one of the first things that you just mentioned there, you know, we do see lots of different individuals coming to us for help, but want to approach things in a very different way to another person. And sometimes that's because of that dynamic. So we have some people who are trying to support young people through education. It could be adult students that are being supported, and that's on a financial level. We speak to some people who are having to send money across seas in order to support family members, and a variety of other, you know, household makeups. And that's the beauty of bespoke debt advice. It needs to be tailored around that person's needs and wants. And that may lead to some options being available and others not. But that's where we come in as the experts, and we understand that. And we can say, actually, this is the perfect solution for you, because it will allow you to continue doing what you need to do, but also deal with the debt problem as well, hand in hand. And there may be other options that we can't consider because of the way they want to approach that. But the important thing is that we can do that real nice match and make sure they understand how that works, the implications of that, and how things could work if they were to change that dynamic as well, because that dynamic may not be there forever. You know, children aren't always children, students aren't always students. That funding may not continue forever, so that could shift. And then the second thing that you mentioned there was women and men and that dynamic and difference. And you're absolutely right. For a long time now, we've seen more women coming to us for debt advice. That shift is changing. We are seeing more and more men coming for help. And I cannot but think that that goes hand in hand with the shift in conversations around mental health for men as well, and how now more people are feeling more confident to get help and are engaging with services that indeed then link in with debt advice. But that nuance is absolutely there, that shift that we need to make. And sometimes we will work with people who want to do small steps in one go. We work with some people that want to do everything in one conversation. That's absolutely fine. We speak to some people who want to do everything online versus everything over the phone, and some people that want to do a mixture of all. And that's how we need to work to support those individuals, and that's exactly what we do, and give that flexibility, and also matching requirements. That, you know, somebody calls us and says, I would like to speak to a female advisor, I would like to speak to a male advisor, can you make that happen along my journey? Absolutely, we can do that, because sometimes it's about comfort that makes the big difference, and getting that right at the beginning is so important. It's one thing that was mentioned earlier about having the right culture, and that goes for the service that we provide as much as the culture within a workplace. You know, having that culture from the off is so important.
Yeah. So Craig, looking at that culture piece and creating that environment where you can have these conversations, and critically understanding that link between mental health and money worries could be a very interconnected kind of conversation. What would your advice be to the many people that are kind of listening to this conversation at the moment? Where's the best place to start if you haven't got this in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think mental health and financial well-being, that they're so aligned that this is where either, trying to do an event or an activity or a program where the two are together, and whether that might be a mental health piece, which is then followed by financial well-being, and then sort of mop up mental health afterwards, almost like a mental health, financial well-being sandwich, or whether actually doing an event where the two are spoken about together. And I think that stems back to, decision making. If you are feeling stressed or anxious, our sort of logical decision-making process will be affected. So trying to deal with the financial issue, it might require some support, whether it's light touch or whether it's structured counselling or therapy. And then vice versa. I think when somebody is going through that financial process, they may be practically dealing with the debt, but the impact it has on relationships with whether it's spouses, children, family members. So having that as something that people know they can lean back to. And I think it's again that support network, whether that's at work, whether it's friends or family. I mean, our decision making when we are feeling high or low, we can make poor decisions, and we're presented with decisions to make every day. So it's like, going to the supermarket when you're hungry, you're probably not going to make the most sensible decisions in terms of healthy food, or even the ones that are most cost effective. And then I think it's looking at sort of our own sort of ability or ego. We often think we're better at making decisions. So if you ask the question, how good are you better than average with money? Probably 90% of people say yes, they are. Well, clearly that numbers don't stack up. And then I think it stems to Antony's point about tools, budgeting, practical solutions. I think breaking it down, making it accessible, making it easy. If something feels easy, if this is something that I can access, whether it's time of day or different mediums. And then I suppose probably just thinking about sort of the behavioral change work that we do in wellbeing, it's making a commitment and saying, I want to improve my finances, I want to lower my debts, I want to save. Once you've made that commitment to improving your financial well-being, colleagues know about it. And if you're there in the pub, they might be saying, why don't you just, have one drink? Or if it's going on a holiday, it might be, well, I found a really good deal that you might be interested in. So everyone then is supporting you in your financial well-being goals. So yeah, making that commitment, but it's a big step. But once you said it out loud, it's then put it into the environment that is something that you want to improve, and there will be people to help you, and that could be friends, it can be family, or it can be specialist support services, which obviously we're discussing today.
Yeah. And Antony, it needs to be taken through your career journey in the workplace, doesn't it? I mean, it's not a sort of deliver a session once, have the conversation once, and then that's job done. It just needs to be a rolling conversation, picking out some of the maybe challenges that you spot in the workplace that people are facing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because of course, if just doing it as a one-off may resonate with some people that are going through that period of time that they need some support, but what about next month, next week? It's all needs to be considered. So absolutely, I think it's going back to that culture. It's just living and breathing that, and understanding it's a cycle and a journey we're all on in different periods of our time in life. And I think that's where it comes down to having that real approach where we're embedding it at all levels, having champions that can go out and talk about it, having, real individuals that live and breathe that and can really take that forward. I absolutely, and I think we will all say the same, I really endorse people with lived experience going forward and talking, because that really resonates. It's something we often do and talk about. And just to Craig's point, people going forward and saying, this worked for me, is far better than someone just coming forward saying, this is what I think you should do. Someone saying, this is what worked for me, whether it's saving money, budgeting, I accessed help, and this is how I did it. So yeah, cross the different areas, but absolutely throughout your life cycle. It's not just a one-off.
And that lived experience, you're absolutely right. It's one thing that we concentrate on with our digital platforms is it's not just us telling you that here's something that you should do. It's actually, well, Jane here what she did. She was in trouble. She had these challenges around her finances, and this is how she kind of got moved out of that particular difficulty. So, yeah, having those conversations or seeing, watching something on a digital platform is so useful. And then pointing you in the right direction as well. So listen, we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for the comments that have been made about the importance of this conversation. We're really delighted that you could join us today and really value your company. If anybody does have a last question or anything that they do want to ask, do put it into the chat. We've got the last few minutes and we're just about to wrap up. But if you do have something that you'd like to ask, please do ask. In the meantime, both of you, let's kind of sum up really where, looking at, if I'm a manager in the workplace, what are some of the sort of top tips that I could take away from today's discussion? Craig, perhaps we could start with you. What would you like to leave people with?
Yeah, I think this might be a topic for another session, but I think it would be sort of prudent of me to mention that there is a business case for this. If we're talking about financial well-being, a classic example would be, if someone's stressed about payday, or if they had to pay a bill that they just haven't got the money for, that stress is obviously affecting their performance, whether they're present at work, and not performing, not able to focus and concentrate, or whether actually it causes, absence as well. So the link between stress and financial concern and then mental well-being, we know the business case is there for that. And I think in terms of, I mentioned it earlier, I think education, it's something that, all children should know about cumulative interest. These are the things that we should talk about at a young age. And I think it's never too late to start talking about financial well-being. And there's things that I'm learning now which, are going to make a difference to my future. Obviously, there's a bit of regret sometimes. I wish I'd have known this earlier. So I think that's the view. Anyone entering the workplace, as part of that induction program, is there a section on financial well-being? What are your financial goals working with us? So I think trying to introduce it into as early into a career, and then in terms of looking at touch points, whether it's something that's quite private within a restroom or an area, or whether it's tagged onto the end of team meetings, whether it's a case of, structured programs. So I think, because it might be quite a new area for a lot of organizations and people watching, that, it's just do something, just, let's get something going. And then you can always sort of, get the feedback and then adjust from there as well. We're not always going to get the advice and the program right first time. But once you've got it underway, we're onto a good thing.
Great, thanks, Craig. And Antony, what would your sort of final piece of advice be?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of things I would quickly mention. So the first thing was linking back to something that Craig mentioned early on, and that was around, it can be, for an employer, it can be sometimes a little scary stepping into this unknown area. And I would say pull on the resources that are around you. Don't feel you've got to do everything yourself. You're not going to be an expert in everything, but there are key organizations that can really help you with this. I'll use debt for an example. Craig mentioned earlier, there can be that fear of overstepping the mark, and that's absolutely true. It's a regulated space, debt advice, but that's where you can pull in experts and actually help them to help you. So that would be number one. Second thing might be that an employer is thinking, what happens if I get this wrong? I would always turn it the other way around and say, what happens if you don't try? Because if you don't try, something could go seriously wrong compared to, the other way around. So I would always look at it from that approach. And then the third thing I'd say is, put out positive messages about the impact that this can have on life. I'll give one around debt, and this will be my final comment. I said earlier that 85% of people that contact us talk about how debt has impacted their mental health. However, the other side of that is what happens once somebody engages and gets debt advice. 93% of clients, those same clients, go on to say, having debt advice has impacted my mental health positively. 69% of people say, I can now open up to friends and family. And 95% of people say, I now feel more confident about having money management conversations and dealing with my finances day to day. So think about the positives, get those messages out, because everybody will always be thinking, what's in it for me? Why should I do this? So think about that.
I'm so glad that we work with you, Raiys, Antony. It's brilliant, and the work that PayPlan do. If somebody's watching this and they don't have a relationship with us as such, or they know that maybe there's somebody in their organisation that they've been talking to who maybe could benefit from some advice from PayPlan, what's the best way to get in touch?
To do that, absolutely. So one thing that's great about my role is that I'm a point of contact for external organizations to link in with. So if you're wanting to just simply refer, you could do that through our website, payplan.com. You could find our phone number on there, or you could connect with me if it's in order to create a more formal relationship, and we can then give you tools and different ways to do that. And what I would happily do is be able to, I'm happy for my details to be shared out there. So it's very easy though. It's antony.price@payplan.com. No H in the name Antony.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, both of you. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. So again, thank you so much for watching. This conversation has been brought to you by Raiys through a combination of digital technology and virtual health and on-site services and data touch points. We create the right solution to help you improve the well-being of your people and enhance your organisational performance. We support the well-being of over 750,000 employees. So do visit our website to discover the wide range of support that we can offer you, and do scan that QR code to connect with us, and then follow us on social media. Well, thank you again, both of you, for your insight today. Thank you to all our guests for watching us. And I do hope that this conversation helps you to bring positive change to your workplace. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.